At some point, usually when life slows down just enough to hear yourself think, something feels off. Not dramatically broken, just misaligned. You wake up, go through the motions, do the things you're supposed to do, and yet there's this quiet sense that you're living slightly to the side of your own life, like you took a wrong exit years ago and never quite corrected it. That realization doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives in silence, in pauses, in the uncomfortable gap between who you are and who you know you could be, or maybe were meant to be. And that gap, as unsettling as it feels, is where self-transformation actually begins. Most people think transformation starts with motivation, or discipline, or some bold decision to finally change everything. But psychologically speaking, that's almost never true. Real transformation starts much earlier and much quieter, with awareness, with noticing, with the moment you stop numbing yourself and start paying attention to what's not working anymore. And honestly, that moment is rarely pleasant. It's confusing. You question your past choices. You wonder how you ended up here. You feel behind, sometimes ashamed, sometimes restless. But that discomfort isn't a flaw in the process. It is the process. Before anything changes on the outside, something has to loosen on the inside. From a psychological perspective, we are mostly creatures of pattern. Our brains love efficiency, predictability, and familiarity. That's why so much of life runs on autopilot. The beliefs you formed early on about yourself, about others, about what's possible for you, quietly shape your decisions long after you've forgotten where those beliefs came from. You don't consciously think, "I'm acting from childhood conditioning today." You just feel hesitation, resistance, self-doubt. You avoid certain risks. You repeat familiar relationships. You sabotage things right when they start to matter. And it all feels rational, even logical, because the mind is very good at justifying what it already believes. This is why transformation isn't about adding new habits on top of an unchanged identity. You can wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, journal, eat perfectly, and still feel stuck if the internal narrative hasn't shifted. Because behavior that isn't supported by identity eventually collapses. The brain, in its own strange way, is loyal to who it thinks you are. Neuroscience backs this up. Through neuroplasticity, we know the brain is constantly reshaping itself based on repeated thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. But it doesn't change randomly. It changes in the direction of what feels familiar, even if what's familiar is painful, even if it's limiting. This is why people stay in patterns that clearly don't serve them. The known feels safer than the unknown. The mind would rather keep an old identity intact than risk the uncertainty of a new one. Stability, even uncomfortable stability, feels like survival. So when you start trying to change, resistance shows up. Not because you're weak or lazy, but because your nervous system interprets change as a threat. You feel anxious, you overthink, you procrastinate, you suddenly lose motivation. That's not failure. That's your system trying to protect the old version of you. This is where many people give up. They assume resistance means they're not meant to change. In reality, resistance usually means you're touching something real. Psychologically, transformation often begins when the cost of staying the same becomes heavier than the fear of changing. When the quiet dissatisfaction turns into something you can't ignore anymore. When the inner voice gets louder and starts asking questions you can't answer with distractions. Questions like, why do I keep repeating this? Why does this still hurt? Why am I pretending I'm fine? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are powerful. Because they interrupt the automatic patterns. They create a pause. And in that pause, choice becomes possible. One of the most important shifts in transformation is moving from behavior-focused change to identity-focused change. Instead of asking, what should I do differently? The deeper question becomes, who am I becoming? Identity is not just a label, it's a self-concept reinforced by memory, emotion, and repetition. If you see yourself as someone who always fails, your brain will unconsciously steer you towards situations that confirm that belief, not out of malice, but out of consistency. The mind craves internal coherence. When actions don't match identity, discomfort arises. That discomfort is called cognitive dissonance. Most people resolve it by changing their actions back to match the old identity. But transformation happens when you allow the discomfort to challenge the identity instead. That's not easy. It feels unstable. You're no longer fully who you were, but you don't yet trust who you're becoming. Psychologists sometimes call this the liminal phase, the in-between space, the psychological no man's land. And it's messy. You might feel lost, emotional, unmotivated one day, strangely clear the next. Old wounds resurface, doubts get louder. This isn't regression, it's reorganization. The brain is literally updating its internal map. During this phase, the stories you tell yourself matter more than ever, not in a fake positive way, but in an honest one. Transformation doesn't require pretending you're confident when you're not. It requires acknowledging what's actually there. Radical self-honesty is uncomfortable, but it's foundational. You cannot change what you refuse to see, and you cannot integrate parts of yourself that you keep rejecting. Many so-called negative behaviors are actually protective strategies. Procrastination often protects against fear. Perfectionism protects against shame. Emotional numbness protects against overwhelm. When you attack these behaviors without understanding them, the mind tightens its defenses. But when you approach them with curiosity, something shifts. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" the more transformative question becomes, "What is this trying to protect me from?" That question alone softens resistance. It signals safety, and safety is essential for change. Psychological research consistently shows that self-compassion is not weakness, it's a catalyst. When the brain feels less threatened, the amygdala calms down. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reflection and choice, comes back online. In simple terms, kindness toward yourself expands your capacity to change. This is why lasting transformation isn't built on self-hatred or constant self-correction. It's built on awareness, integration, and emotional literacy. You learn to feel instead of suppress, to listen instead of override, to respond instead of react. Emotions, after all, are information. Anxiety often signals uncertainty or misalignment. Anger can point to violated boundaries. Sadness may indicate unprocessed loss. When emotions are ignored, they don't disappear. They reroute into habits, into tension, into patterns you don't consciously choose. Transformation asks you to stay present with what you feel long enough to understand it. Not drown in it, not dramatize it. Just notice it, feel it, let it move. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the internal landscape changes. What's interesting is that most transformation happens in very small moments, not in grand decisions, but in subtle pauses. You catch yourself before reacting. You choose honesty over approval. You say no when you would have said yes out of fear. You rest without guilt. You speak more slowly. You listen more carefully. Each of those moments rewires something. Over time, those micro-choices accumulate. And one day you realize you're no longer fighting yourself the way you used to. The old triggers don't hook you as deeply. The same situations feel lighter. You're still human, still imperfect, but less divided internally. From the outside, it may not look dramatic, but internally, it's everything. Another often overlooked aspect of transformation is environment. We like to believe change is purely internal, but psychology says otherwise. Your surroundings constantly reinforce who you believe you are. The people you're around, the conversations you have, the content you consume, the spaces you spend time in. If your environment keeps pulling you back into an old identity, transformation becomes harder. Not impossible, but harder. That's why intentional change often involves adjusting external cues, removing triggers, creating visual reminders, choosing spaces that reflect who you're becoming, not just who you were. This isn't about isolation or superiority, it's about alignment. Because transformation is not about becoming someone extraordinary. It's about becoming more honest, more integrated, more awake. And it never really ends. Identity is dynamic. Life keeps presenting new thresholds, new challenges, new layers to integrate. Each time you grow, something else asks to be seen. Transformation isn't a ladder you climb once. It's a spiral you move through again and again, each time with a little more awareness, a little less fear. There will be losses along the way. Some people won't recognize you anymore. Some versions of yourself will dissolve. Comfort will be traded for clarity. That can feel lonely at times. But what you gain is alignment, and alignment has a quiet strength to it. Eventually, change stops feeling like something you're forcing. It becomes something you're allowing. You act less from desperation and more from truth. You stop chasing who you think you should be and start embodying who you already are beneath conditioning and fear. And when that happens, life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes real. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of repeat. You live with a sense of internal coherence that doesn't depend on constant validation. That's not enlightenment. That's psychological maturity. So, if you're in that uncomfortable space right now, the in-between, unsure, restless, questioning everything, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means something old is loosening. Something new is trying to emerge. You don't need to rush it. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to stay present enough to not fall asleep again. Because self-transformation isn't about reinventing yourself overnight. It's about staying conscious long enough to evolve naturally, choice by choice, moment by moment. And that, quietly, changes everything.